people reach out to me like, Dale, how do I get started ranching? How do I get started rodeoing? One of those two things. That's where How to Be a Cowboy, the Netflix show, that's where it came from. I got that DM, still get it 20 times a day. How do I get started ranching?
Your motivation to do this could lead to employing several people.
Yeah.
I've got a dozen people that work in this warehouse.
He was like Billy Graham mixed with Woodrow F. Call. The comedy side of my DNA came from my mom. My dad had some jokes occasionally, but like he was a serious man and he was a God-fearing man. And faith and loyalty are the two attributes I would attach to his legacy.
Welcome back to the Wealthy Cowboy Show. I'm Crockett Carruthers. We're here. Got a real special treat for you this time. We're not in the normal studio. We're shooting on the road in this other cool studio here. And we're in Winnebago, Texas. So that probably gives you a hint to who we have on. Old son, the greatest cowboy to ever live, super puncher Dale Brisby.
Well, Dale, yeah. For those of you that don't know me, don't worry, your mom does.
Dale, I heard you tell a story about, I think you said it was maybe your first time to Vegas and you're kind of just breaking out into the apparel deal and all that. And there was a conversation between Trevor Brazile and Cody Johnson, and Trevor said that you would do more for our industry than anybody else would, or either one of them would. And I think that's very true. You can talk to a day working cowboy on a ranch somewhere that hadn't been to town very much, and you can also go to town and talk to Joe Rogan or Glenn Beck or a millionaire from New York. So I think you're a great ambassador. You're very well read. When did that start? Like at some point you're a kid growing up in West Texas to a rodeo cowboy to a ranch cowboy. Where did the thirst for knowledge and reading all these different books and kind of, where did all that come from? Like, was there a time in your life that it just switched or?
Well, first off, I got to address, like what Trevor said. The thing about him saying that, I had showed up to that NFR in mud boots and a vest and no T-shirt. Mm-hmm. And I had very few videos. And Trevor, if you talk to him, is an extremely intelligent individual. He's very witty. He could do anything. He chose to be a cowboy, and his work ethic and led him to what he is now. Mm-hmm. And so him, number one, it was flattering and I guess validation that he saw everything. What up, Big Don? That he saw what I was doing early on. Because there's a lot of gray hairs out there that don't understand the internet, mm-hmm. and they see me and they're like, what's this guy's deal? Mm-hmm. And 7 years later, they're like, okay, I kind of get it. But day one, not only Trevor, but Cody Johnson, they understood, okay, this guy's a comedian and this is funny and here's what he's doing.
Yeah. And
as he goes down this path, this is what's going to happen for the industry.
You reach a whole new demographic of people.
And I don't think that I'm going to have a bigger impact than those two. So, but the fact that he said that, number one, validated the path I was on. And it just kind of like, it was encouraging to me, mm-hmm. to get that sort of confirmation from two GOATs in the industry.
Yeah.
It started, I've always been the class clown. And I was never afraid to be different. I stood out, and I was okay with that. Mm-hmm. And that was in my family, in the circles of my family, and then that carried over to the circles of school. I guess I'm just kind of trying to go down the path of what put me where I'm at, and the mindset of being okay with being different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, showing up to the NFR and walking around Cowboy Christmas with no shirt on is, and
You probably got a lot of looks.
A lot of looks, and you got to be okay with getting looks. No matter who you are or what you're doing, you have to be okay with that. Because in the beginning, nobody thinks it will work. Nobody. You know, like there were not, like the way Trevor saw that it would work, nobody else agreed with him.
Yeah.
He would have maybe been chastised had he said that like in public. I don't know. But the other thing that started to happen was I had the approval of the mob. So like the gray hairs in the industry that were not interested in doing a deal with me or having me around, that didn't understand it. Eventually, the 7 years later that they did come around to it, well, they realized that the mob, like in Gladiator, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When he tells Marcus Aurelius, he's like, you got to win over the mob. That's how you win your freedom. And that's exactly what it is. And those gray hairs, they're like, I don't understand it, but I guess, you know, and because the audience, the market has spoken. And I can't be arrogant about that either because, you know, it could go the other way if I'm not careful.
Yeah.
And, but anyhow, whatever, I'm kind of bouncing around. The point is early on, I was willing to be a class clown and I was willing to be different. I also had like entrepreneurial tendencies, you know, like I remember going to a field trip when I was in like third grade and I had not a ton of money to, you know, for lunch on this field trip. And, but I had a bunch of yo-yos. Yo-yos were big back then, not to date myself, but they were. And I took a bunch of yo-yos, some string, oil for the bearings. Anyhow, I came back from the field trip with like $32 or $36 or something kind of silly for a second grader to have, you know? But I was a salesman and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the thrill of it. It's kind of like chasing a girl, talking to a girl, you know, it's like, or getting on a bucking horse, you know, there's just this anticipation of like, how's this going to go? I've got to perform.
I feel that also, like getting into sales. I never would have thought I would have got into a sales role in the mainstream business world, but there's that dopamine hit. You know, you get it from closing a sale, from doing a deal, the same as you'd get from. I come from the timed event side, from roping a calf and tying one fast,
and you're done, and you're walking back. You're like,
or roping a cow out in the brush and getting a wild one caught or whatever. You know, there's still that rush there. It's a little bit different, but it's still there. It's something I never would have thought about. But
yeah, so mix that with my thrill of the comedic chase of making people laugh. So there's a sales side of like closing a sale. There's making a room. You know, my mom was my first fan, and making her laugh was just like the best feeling, you know? And so mix those two things, you know, fast forward, now there's the internet and YouTube, and we start putting out videos, and I realized that the comedic side of things, if I lean into that with these videos, it could be the branding for the sales. And essentially that's what came to fruition. Also, my dad put me in FFA, which is, you know, for those of you that don't know, Future Farmers of America is what it used to stand for. Now it's, you know, they dropped the words from that, and it's just National FFA organization. But essentially, it's the largest student-led organization in the country, meaning like kids run it, and high school kids. It's run through the ag science classes that are offered in high school. So it's the counterpart to 4-H. 4-H and FFA are very similar, but essentially in FFA you're able to a lot of people think of stock shows. Well, there's another that's like a CDE, like a career development event. Well, there's LDEs, which are leadership development events. Being the ag teacher's son,
you got to do
the
everything.
LDEs were like extemporaneous speaking, for instance. You got a jar full of topics on little pieces of paper. You pull out 3, and then you get to choose one. They give you 20 minutes to prepare a speech. You go before 3 judges, and you give a 5-minute speech on this topic. That was my favorite. And so
were you naturally good at that?
I don't know how good I was. Like in my head, I enjoyed it.
They didn't bother you though.
I enjoyed it. Yeah. I mean, like looking back, if you'd have heard some of those speeches, they probably sucked.
Yeah.
But I did it and I delivered it and I finished the speech. You know, like I didn't go to state in it, but I enjoyed it. And so leaning into that, and then I was a state officer, which the point that is relevant only because we did speaking events in front of thousands of people. And so that helped
got you used to it.
Alleviate some fears. And so like getting on camera, by the time we were making YouTube videos was nothing. So the FFA, my sales background, being a class clown, all those things came together. And
most people's number one fear is public speaking.
Right.
I heard Jerry Seinfeld tell this joke that public speaking was over death. So people would rather be in the casket than the person giving the eulogy at the funeral.
Right. And I'm not saying I'm just completely, there's some, like I've thought about, for instance, stand-up comedy, and that does scare me, you know, because that's a different kind of public speaking. You know, like if I had to stand up and talk about my cows or horses in front of 10,000 people, like whatever, that's easy. You know, but if I'm tasked with stand-up comedy, making them laugh, because in a Snapchat, I don't know, maybe it is the same. I might.
But you don't get that instant feedback if you're on video. You know, you're doing the same thing, trying to make people laugh and entertain people or provide value, whatever you're doing. But when you're on stage, especially a comic, you tell that joke and have that punchline, and if they don't laugh, it's like, what do I do now?
Right. Yeah.
So it's just a shorter feedback loop than this social media.
Exactly.
When you started, would you say it was 4 or 5 years before you ever started selling apparel from your you're doing YouTubes?
So I mean, I was like doing prank calls, doing a bunch of stuff, like not really making videos, but had a social media presence from 2010 to 2013. Made the first video July 1st, 2013. It's still up. Dale Brisby, Bull Rider 1. And so that was 10.5 years ago. So 10 years and 7 months or something like that. And sometime late in 13 or 14 is when we started selling a little bit of apparel. Because in that first video, I was wearing this Rodeo Time cap. And
I bought that first cap with the trucker cap, kind of with the print.
Yes.
I think that was one of the only things available. I think the only cap available.
Yeah, so I had one cap and I had 3 shirts. Old Son, Riding Bulls, Punch Fools, and the Rodeo Time trademark. So anyhow, the Rodeo Time trademark is a whole nother story. It's a good story. It's cool, but it's kind of a long-winded thing. But long story short, it's my trademark and has been for over 10 years. But then I realized the formula, which was these videos were essentially branding for the apparel. And so it was just lean into it, reap what you sow, you know, make more videos, sell more apparel. And eventually we started monetizing the YouTube channel, but for the longest I didn't even know how to set it up. We were just making videos with copyrighted music. And I want to say it was like 2016 before I really even monetized YouTube. So I made YouTube videos for 3 years and just sold a little bit of apparel. The apparel was the only thing.
When you started doing those videos, were you thinking about money?
No, not at all. Not at all. So like the reason we even had a little bit of apparel was because that hat I was wearing, people were, we made so many videos before we ever sold apparel. And the reason we made it is people would go say, like have it made just at a one-off.
Yeah.
They would take it. They liked our videos and that was the cap I was wearing. And so like they would go to a mom and pop embroidery deal and it would just say Rodeo Time. They would try to remake it. And so,
there was a demand.
There was a demand for it before there was a product. And this guy had made a Rodeo Time cap like in the 80s. And you can still find them. There's a few of them out there. And it was before I was even born. And I found out who it was. He was still alive, but he ran into some supply chain issues on the way he wanted to make the caps. And so I reached out to him and bought the copyrights from it. It was all legal. He told me a price. I paid it. And
It's probably very small to what.
Well, for him, it was, he wasn't doing it. He hadn't done anything with it in decades. It was just this thing. Like, I found the cap in a flea market. Like, he didn't even, like, he was like, yeah, I made like some of the, you know. So for him, like, it was like, yeah, sure, whatever, you know, like he wasn't going to do anything with it. And so we made it official, signed the paperwork and trademarked it. And anyhow, and so we had a few caps, but like there were so many videos that we'd already been doing just because it was fun. Like I enjoyed making people laugh. There was no sort of, you know, desert island I was going to one day buy, you know, down at the end of the, and there still isn't, but I was essentially just doing what I enjoyed. I was a comedian, and now I had this new avenue, and I could make something funny and send it to someone. I didn't have to be standing in front of them. Yeah. And it was that simple. And, so one thing led to another. And then by the time, I mean, it was 2015. 2015 came around. It wasn't until 2016 that Rodeo Time started. I went full time in 2016. So over 2013 to 2016, we kind of, I mean, like, I didn't take a dime out of Rodeo Time. Everything was reinvesting, and I didn't have any, like I was rodeoing, and rodeo was an income. I was day working, and then Rodeo Time was just paying for Rodeo Time, and I was building it. And then in 2016, I decided I was working for my brother-in-law. He married my sister here in Young County, and I was doctoring yearlings and day working, and he sold them all, and then he was about to buy them back, and I was like, I think I'm ready to do this full time. And so from that point forward, I was just Rodeo Time and rodeoing, and those were my two streams of income. And that was coming on 8 years ago,
and that was cool for me. I saw some of those early videos, like you're saying, with mud boots and vest with no shirt and that Rodeo Time hat, and not like y'all were chasing pigs or something like that. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And kind of kept up with it a little bit. I don't watch a lot of YouTube, but I kept up with it a little bit, saw some of it, and I was like, man, this is pretty cool. And I liked your style, like that hat. So I got that. And then I was like, this guy's pretty cool. And you know, you hear things, people are going to hate on you or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And then it's our world is so small that there was mutual friends of ours, like, and I would see pictures of y'all day working and you rodeoing and stuff, and I was like, not only is this guy funny, but he's real. He's a real deal cowboy.
That would throw people off, because like there would be like some asinine thing I would say, but then I'd be at the 4-6s, or like I'd be standing next to Trevor or Leon Coffey or JB Mooney, and it's just like people would be like, man, that guy's an idiot. But this other thing that he's around him with is pretty, you know, it'd throw people off, you know? And so people started to catch on, you know, and it was just, but yeah, that was just the early days, and man, 8 years ago.
And that was early in my mind. That was probably early for content at all, right? Like there wasn't a whole lot of creators out there. And I'm sure it was very weird for you to show up day working and having people film you, and the same with rodeos.
Yeah. You know, like, I mean, if you watch, to be honest, like if I'm like somewhere, the 4-6s, for instance, if I'm there for a week, you know, if you watch some of those clips, like the actual working part, it might total 2 or 3 minutes. Well, if I'm there for a week and we have like a 60-hour work week, 2 minutes is like, you know, 15, that's 8 15-second clips. That's not very much. Like, you don't even notice it. You know, and so somebody might say, like, Dale's on his phone a lot. Well, hold on. 2 minutes in a week? That's not very much, you know, because the rest of it will be at the teepees or something. Yeah. You know, so like, and also, like, if you've ever been on a big drive, like, you can stop, you can get off your horse, you can take a poop, like you can go over to your buddy, you can chit chat. Like there's a lot of instances, you know, like I'm pretty good about knowing the heat of the moment, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to pull my phone out when somebody's
in the middle of a cow fight.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, I just won't get that. Like, who cares, you know? Now here at my house, we're filming everything. Like the cows I have here, like these cameras pay for these cows, you know? But if I'm day working somewhere, I'm pretty damn responsible. You know, like I'm not an idiot. So some people might shake their heads, but they're going to shake their heads no matter what. But yeah, those videos, I learned the like I said, for them to be interested, you have to be interesting. You know, I've got to provide value. I've got to provide more value to the audience in exchange for asking for something in return. So Gary Vee says, give, ask. It's not give, take. He calls it jab, right hook. And essentially what that means is like brand, sell. So like if you personally, like you watched enough videos and I brought you enough value that when Christmas time rolled around, I was like, hey, I've also got these caps. You were like, heck yeah. You know, one thing about me, I really enjoy basketball, you know? And so like, I watch basketball and blah, blah, you know, well then like when a t-shirt pops up, I might buy that t-shirt because like I've gotten so much value out of watching these certain players play and dunk and do all these things, you know? And so like for me to buy that t-shirt, like I'll gladly give my wallet out, and like the value I've gotten from watching this team play, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some people come to the internet and they just ask. They don't give anything. And they wonder why it doesn't work. Well, they've forgotten what it's like to be a consumer of the, you know.
Yeah, you can't just. He really, you know, in my mind, built it right. It's hard if you were relying on that for your sole income. You know, it wouldn't have worked. But you built a huge brand and had a bunch of people ask, and then you gave them the product. It's not like you were just trying to monetize right off the bat. You were just being you.
Yes.
Just following your passion and putting it out there. And then when people start asking, you know, give them what they ask for, right?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Like it's like you pour water on a table. Keith Mundy with American Hats told me this analogy, but you pour water on a table and you see where it goes. We don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where it would go on this table. We pour water on it, we see where it goes, and then that's where we go to clean up the mess. Well, that's the same thing in business and with what I've done. Like essentially I just started doing and pouring water on a table, and it went down this apparel route. And so that's what I followed. And there's 3 ways to monetize on the internet with the kind of line of work I'm in. Number 1, you can sell a product, which is what I do. Number 2, you can get sponsors and help them sell a product. Or number 3, you can offer a service. And so I do all 3. I kind of look at a number 4 and a 5 stream of income. YouTube would be number 4 because that's those are like essentially ads, sponsors that I don't have to go monetize. So I kind of put them in a different category than the sponsors I have. And then the 5th way to monetize would be appearances, in my opinion. So there's 5 streams of income, all that you can do based on doing one thing, and that's create and distribute content. So once you get going, you know, in the beginning, you don't want to think about those 5 streams of income. You want to just do the fundamentals and do them good and do them over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Like same with you with this podcast, that's what I would suggest to you, you know, like if somebody comes to you with a sponsorship, that's fine, but I wouldn't worry about the money. Like I would just try to get the best guests you can, you know, and you're starting at the bottom, Dale Brisby. So you know, like you scraping the bottom of the barrel here, but like try to get the best guests you can and bring your audience the most value possible. And don't worry about the money. It'll come. Like just do it over and over and over and over again. Like bring value. And he who holds the breath the longest wins. That's what Gary Vee said. And what he was referring to was like creators like yourself. The longer you're able to hold your breath and hold out and push the money to the side and tell people no. He who holds his breath the longest wins, meaning like when you finally do monetize it, it should hit harder. For instance, if you had apparel, like, well, if you wait till you had the most followers, or if you like hold out for a sponsor, like the numbers are just going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah. That's what I really like Alex Hormozy right now. And that's one of the things he says is the longer you can delay the ask, the more you can ask for. Mm-hmm. And really, I'm not looking to to make a big income or anything off of this. I'm looking to provide value. I think there was a need for something like this.
I think it's okay if you do.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing morally wrong with coming to the, like I talked about like how like I wasn't here to make money. That doesn't mean that I'm like better than somebody that does show up to make, like it's okay to want to make money.
Everybody's got to.
This is capitalism. This is free enterprise.
Yeah.
Like you got to pay the bills. And so I don't think there's anything morally wrong with you doing this podcast with the end goal of monetizing it.
Yeah.
Like that, what's wrong with that? Like I'm not a liberal. No offense to anybody who is, but like I am a capitalist, and that's what drives this country. Your motivation to do this could lead to employing several people.
Yeah.
I've got a dozen people that work in this warehouse. My number one paid employee is Lisa. She runs my life. Single mom, 5 kids. She makes more money working for me than she has in any other job she's ever had. She's happier now than she's ever been. Mm-hmm. My motivation to be honest, like I grew up poor. My motivation is fear of being poor. Mm-hmm. I don't have an end goal number in mind because, to be honest, I just don't want to go back to being poor.
Yeah.
I enjoy a steak. Like I do. I'm sorry. Like I just don't want to be poor. It terrifies the shit out of me. And that's my motivation. Lisa has benefited from that motivation more than anybody on my team. Right. I don't know. Like Donnie, who just walked in and walked out, he's going to go to the NFR. What he was doing before, he was a bartender in Missouri. And because of me coming down this path and being motivated, Donnie's now a bronc rider. Mm-hmm. He's got checks in that desk right there. I was looking for an SD card and I saw, like he's winning money riding broncs. Mm-hmm. And he's benefited from my motivation. So like, I hope that you do make a lot of money because not only you and that little precious girl you had with you are going to be, like she's going to have a great life. Hopefully the one better than you. I don't know what your past is, but like, that's what I hope for my kids, and there's just nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, everybody talks about Elon Musk and how much money he made. Well, he paid a whole freaking lot in taxes. There's a lot of there's a lot of Lisas out there that have the best life they've ever had because of Elon Musk. So let him make some money. Who cares? There's a lot of other people benefiting. But anyhow, and I know I think you probably feel the same as I do,
And that's kind of what this is about. Like the wealthy cowboy, it's tying to the cowboy way of life, like me and you live, but also the other side of it that you've seen, and I've seen a little bit of it, but the business side, the mainstream business and money and how money works and the game of money. And if somebody, I feel like there's got to be other people out there that it's fine if you just want to be a camp cowboy and make $2,000 a month or whatever.
1,000%.
That is fine, but there's got to be. I know there's other people out there like me that have bigger goals and want to own their own ranch and own some of their own things and be able to go do and have the freedom.
Well, here's the flip side of my coin. All that I just said. My dad died. That's a couple of months before my first video. May of 2013, 2 months before my first video. When he died, he had $800 in his account. Split that 4 ways. Do the math.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't really have any debt. He had a pickup payment, and that was it. And he also had a really cool job managing a ranch that Leroy and I took over, and they gave us the job behind him because we were working for him. And so essentially he gave me a fishing pole, and it was a really good start. I worked there for 2 years before they sold it in 2015. They sold the ranch, and so that's when I came up here to Young County to work for Chet. Well, anyways, He died with $800. If I had to trade, you know, any amount of wealth, like it's like choose, like maybe Elon Musk. Like if I've got the opportunity to be the Elon Musk of rodeo or my dad, 1,000 times out of 1,000, I would choose my dad.
Yeah.
Like the man he was. Like he was a cowboy. He died horseback. He, when we were born, he was working. He was a camper, just like you said.
Mm-hmm.
West Camp at the not at the 4.6s, at the Pitchfork Ranch. It borders the 4.6s, but that's where we lived. It was the 2-story house. They've since torn it down. There were snakes everywhere, but and that was the life he lived, and that was the life he died. He was a cowboy. He was like Billy Graham mixed with Woodrow F. Call. The comedy side of my DNA came from my mom. My dad had some jokes occasionally, but like he was a serious man and he was a God-fearing man. And faith and loyalty are the two attributes I would attach to his legacy. Mm-hmm. And 1 Corinthians 15:58, stand firm in the Lord. And that's what he would do. That's what he would be doing today. And he also had $800 in his account. He was poor, he was broke, you know. Mm-hmm. He had a good job. He worked his ass off, and he raised a family that hopefully we all fear the Lord. But there's just no question. I would not, if I had to pick, I'm picking him. Now, moving forward from that, is there a way that I can create a legacy like my old man had, but then also, you know, have more than we had growing up? And I think there is. We can get creative. It's not an or thing.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord, it's an and thing. It can be an and thing. Mm-hmm. It can be that, you know.
That's the message I'm trying to push. It's not, because a lot of people think, you know, money is the root of all evil, which greed can drive people to do evil things, and it does. But there are a lot of big money people out there, you know, that I follow that use their money for good and philanthropy and mentoring younger people. And just like you said, also that's what drives the economy, right? A rich person has a business and they employ a lot of people, and you know, it can change their lives. And
I think you said greed can drive a lot, and I think there's a lot of times that greed can. There is. That greed is maybe what drives people. But I think most often I don't think it's greed that drives people down this path of money too far. I think the biggest issue in this entire country with the fall of, dating back to the fall of man, the biggest issue that nobody talks about is pride. I think pride is competitive. I think all pride is competitive. I don't think all competition is pride, but I do think all pride is competitive. And because once you start to get a little bit of money or anything, it could be anything, but we're talking about money. So like you start to get a little bit of money, now all of a sudden you start to notice, oh, Jim over here, you know, or the Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses. Like that's what that is. Mm-hmm. They're competing with the Joneses. Well, even that analogy is talking about money. Mm-hmm. Like they're going to, we need a little bit bigger house because the Joneses in town have a bigger house and it's going to make you feel better. All right. Yeah. Well, that's not greed driving you. That's pride. Mm-hmm. Pride is what made the devil. And then like it talks about the devil was such a beautiful angel. Like he was in Ezekiel, it talks about his pride, and that's what caused him and a third of the angels to fall before man was even created. Then in the Garden of Eden, the devil used pride and put that in man, and tempted man with that. Like, hey, if you eat this fruit, you can be like God. And I was like, yeah, I want to be like God. Mm-hmm. And so that's what pride caused the fall of man. Like it's the OG sin. And it is in all of us. And pride is competitive. That's why if you are a proud person, like I am, you don't typically get along with proud people. Everybody gets along with a humble person because they don't compete with you. Yeah. If you think about the most humble people you can think of, everybody loves them. But usually, and a humble person can get along with proud people. but usually you don't see the most, like, if the more you dislike it, the more you have it. So be careful. But anyways, whatever. The point is that's something that like I've just got a little bit more of like a personal over the last couple of years. Like I've got a couple of very humble people in my life that I've been studying, just watching them. Mm-hmm. Two of them are guys, one of them's a girl, but they're just the most humble. These three individuals are the most humble that I know. And I've been studying them, and I've been reading. I've probably read 6 books on pride and humility. And I've now realized just how much pride I've had my entire life. And it's caused me to realize like why I don't like certain individuals, just because my pride is in competition with theirs. Mm-hmm. The only thing I've done is identify it. I've gotten no closer to humility, which is the opposite of pride. Whatever. That's a whole nother tangent, but I do think if you're a Christian out there and you're trying to walk, the opposite of pride is humility. Everything that is the devil is like what made the devil is pride. Well, the opposite of that is what made Christ is his humility. He humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's Philippians 2. Like Christ was a picture of humility. And so as Christians, that's what we should strive for is humility.
How do you balance that? That's something that where I'm at on my journey right now is kind of tough, because you want to balance your gratitude, be very grateful for what you have, being alive, everything. You want to be grateful first of all, but then you also have that hunger for more and the drive and the pride, to go out there and make money, or to go be the best at a sport, or to be the best bull rider, to be the best cowboy. How do you go about balancing that, you think?
Well, the Bible says to work wholeheartedly as if for the Lord in Colossians 3:23. And it's okay to work hard at something, mm-hmm. but you really need to look at your motivation in what's getting you there. It's not a sin to compete. I'm not saying all competition is pride. I think all pride is competition. We all know how, my dad this is one thing my dad told me never told me, is that he was proud of me. Mm-hmm. He said the Bible said God opposes the proud. And what C.S. Lewis says is that sometimes what someone means, just the English language, if you told Lottie that you were proud of her because she says her first word, what you might mean is you have a warm-hearted admiration for her. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people that say the word, no, it's okay to be proud. I'm proud of my kid. It's her first step. Well, what you might mean is you have a warm-hearted admiration for your kid. Or you might actually mean proud, and you are literally proud that your kid can walk and the Joneses kid down the street is the same age and can't. Mm-hmm. And there's literally that competition in you, and you're like, hell yeah. Look at Lottie. They think they're all better than me. My kid's walking and yours isn't. Like that, you see what I'm saying? Like you can feel that. That's sin. That is sin. And that's what the Bible says, not Dale Brisby. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where you've got to really analyze, like when you are trying to be a good cowboy, are you trying to rope really good in this pen full of calves? Are you trying to not miss because so-and-so over there that you don't like didn't miss? That is a competitive pride that I believe is a sin. Mm-hmm. That is the opposite of humility. That is not the way Jesus Christ would act. If that is your motivation, I think you need to reanalyze why it is you want to. Now, if you want to do really good because the Lord has blessed you with this opportunity and you'd like to do good, but there's
keep it internal.
There's a vanity is like, the book that I read that really sparked this is Mere Christianity. And it's a long book. It's called The Book for the Unconvinced. And it's a former atheist explaining Christianity to people. And he doesn't use a lot of scripture in it because he's trying to essentially convince, for instance, an atheist who doesn't believe in the Bible. So he's approaching Christianity from a logical point of view, and he's using the world. Well, anyways, there's a chapter in there, coincidentally, called The Greatest Sin, or The Great Sin. It starts on page 121. And for about 7 pages, he talks about pride and humility, unlike anything I'd ever read before. And it opened me up to some books, but essentially he describes pride, and vanity is a little more innocent version where it's like, at least we care what people think. We're worried about what people think. Like when I ride into the Brandon pen, like, man, I hope I do good in front of all my buddies.
Yeah.
Well, that's vanity. And, but there's a step further, a little more black diabolical pride that I don't even care what they think. I'm better than all these guys, and I don't care what they think. That's like a deeper. It's a spiritual sin. There's fleshly sins. That's just like you're tempted to gorge yourself at the buffet, and kind of gluttony. There's sexual temptation. That's like a fleshly but then there's a spiritual sin that would be like a spiritual cancer.
Yeah.
And what gets really tricky, we're getting into the weeds on Christianity, but like what gets really, they're not weeds. Okay, they're flowers. What gets really tricky is when, for instance, the Pharisees, and I'm fearful that I've done this in my walk because I've never drank. There was a time where I'd never cussed even. And it's just like you start checking those boxes for the sake of pride. You understand?
So like you're saying
you're proud.
You're proud that you never drink. Yeah.
And what C.S. Lewis says is the devil is completely contented at seeing your chilblains cured, which is like just a sore, like a cut on your, he's completely content seeing a cut on your hand cured in exchange to give you cancer, which is what pride is. I've got my 2 years of work on this, not work, like I'm not trying to learn this so I can tell you guys, but like Donald Brown at the R.A. Brown Ranch, he had me come, he was like, hey, can you come talk at my church? And I was like, all right, sure. This is what I've been studying. I'll talk about this. And they filmed it. And so we put it online. It's called Dale Brisby Sermon. Just look up Dale Brisby Sermon. It's got all the scriptures that I've been studying to put together just where I'm at right now in my study of my personal pride. Regardless, how does that affect my business? I think in every way. Mm-hmm. A lot of my videos, like, it's funny the path that God has taken me with my comedy, but like really like my daily struggle is what I've just been talking about for the last 6 minutes. The cocky bull rider who's essentially like every morning, like I'm just studying this spiritual cancer that I have. Mm-hmm. That's not going to keep me from leaning into the comedy side of things. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
trying to make people laugh. Like, I think that God has a sense of humor, but,
yeah, I think you've really, evolved from starting out just comedy, doing pranks, doing stupid stuff, the cocky bull rider, the greatest cowboy ever and all this stuff. But now you're pushing out the message of faith, spreading positivity and being a positive influence to the world. And a lot of young kids follow you and being a positive influence to them and being a great ambassador of Cowboys, I think.
Thank you. Number one. One way that I have felt, you talked about like, how do we as businessmen, cowboys, like move forward addressing like our pride. So like I do as a businessman, I very much appreciate like real estate, specifically rental property. Mm-hmm. And I like single family homes. Multifamily is super interesting to me, but mm-hmm. single family, like it just has like, you got a lot more options when it comes time to like exit and you're trying to get out of there, like a lot more buyers out there. Well, anyways, so like in this little town, you know, one of my good friends is real estate agent here, and Lisa knows the community and, you know, missed out on a couple properties. And to certain individuals who have X amount of properties. And I think that one way that pride can attach to you in business is like, because I could feel it. It's just like, oh man, we got whooped on this one by so-and-so who has this, this, and this. If that becomes my new motivation, I believe that is the beginning of, I'm going down a path that could lead to some super serious spiritual cancer.
Yeah.
You know, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And I think a lot of people lean into that. I think we're encouraged to lean into that. The world is encouraged. Matter of fact, if you are not a Christian, you are 100% encouraged to lean into being proud of your work. But go to the scriptures. You can tell me, people can, like, if you're out there listening and you can say like, no, there's some good pride. All right. I disagree with you, but you find it for me in the scriptures. Find it for me.
Yeah.
Because I can't.
Well, and just like you were saying earlier, they could be using the word in a different meaning.
And there's a lot of instances like that.
Mm-hmm. And you
like
got to define, you can get into that in any argument, you know, arguing with my wife, we may not be communicating, like we may be saying the same word, but different meaning. You got to define, you know, what those words are. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when you say them, what the other person
100%.
means.
It means everything. Mm-hmm. The definition of the word you're using in the context of it means everything. But I think this is the biggest thing in the world. And you can have no more faith than you have humility.
And I talk about sometimes with Shady, I listen to Brad Lee a lot. And one thing he says is humble. A lot of people say, you know, you need to stay humble or whatever. And a lot of times on his show, he will ask Siri, you know, the definition of a word. And humble is, one definition of it is have a low opinion of oneself. And he's like, that's not me. You don't need to be humble. You don't need to have a low opinion of yourself. You know, if you've got something inside of you, you need to have the confidence, you know, to get it out there, to put it out. It may help somebody.
Well, Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 21 through chapter 4, verse 7, he's addressing the church in Corinth. And what's happening is, in this church, Paul started the church and then he left. And he's addressing the church. They start bragging and they start like, well, I need to be the leader because Paul discipled me. Somebody else says, I need to be the leader because Apollos discipled me. Cephas, there's 3 of them. And they're arguing. And Paul says, do not boast in men. Don't be prideful about the men that you're, you know, like, well, I'm buddies with Trevor, you know, like, don't boast in men. And Paul says, I don't care what you think. Paul takes it one step further that nobody takes it to. Nobody in this world right now takes it to the length that Paul did. Paul says, I don't care what you think of me. Matter of fact, I don't even care what I think of me. He says, my conscience is clear. Why did I say it like that? My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. Paul in 1 Timothy calls himself the chief of all sinners. This is maybe the most influential person in the history of man, at least top 5. He wrote most of the New Testament. He's essentially formed like all these churches. Like he is the Christian church, and he calls himself the chief of sinners. But in Romans 8:1, he says, there is now, therefore, no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. So like when you come to Christ, it's much different. You went to Tarleton? Mm-hmm. You went for 4 years, and then they hand you a piece of paper. Well, when you come to Christ, you go into freshman orientation, they hand you your diploma the first day. And they're like, all right, go to class. The world doesn't work like that. But with Christ, it does. And that's what Paul meant. There is now therefore no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. So you come to Christ and you're good. So your opinion of you actually doesn't matter. Other people's opinion of you definitely doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Your opinion of you doesn't either, is what Paul is saying in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 21 through chapter 4, verse 7. He said, I don't care what you think. I don't even care what I think. He thinks he's the chief of sinners. He thinks he was the lowest of low. Turned out he's one of the most influential people in the world. Mm-hmm. In the history of man, not just the world. And that is something, because everybody is going to tell you, don't worry about what they think. Even non-Christians will tell you that.
Yeah.
But nobody says don't even worry about what you think.
Yeah.
Except for Paul.
Yeah, and I want to get back on business here in a minute, but since we went off on this, have you read the book Wild at Heart?
No, I need to. People have told me to. Yeah, I've heard of it.
I got it for Christmas, and I'd really forgot. I have a book list in my notes, and when I hear something, I'll put it in there. Well, for Christmas, I just sent this out. I said, if y'all want to get me something, get me a book off this list. My sister-in-law got this, and I was like, I couldn't even remember what it was about, but I got into it reading it, and it's pretty cool. It's about being a man, mm-hmm. and he ties a lot of it back to Christianity and a lot of it back to Scripture, but also, being a man, being strong, providing. He relates it back to going out in the wild and like you're hunting and stuff like that now, going out, being in nature, being in wild. And I think that's a big topic right now, the red pill or whatever, Andrew Tate, Justin Waller, those guys, and the other side saying it's toxic and all this stuff. What do you think? What are your views? You can relate it back to Scripture however you want, but like, what are your views? What do you think a man should be? What do you think are some things a man can do to find himself?
When David was going after the king's daughter, he was like, bring me 100 Philistine foreskins. And instead he brought him 200. And he cut the dicks off of 200 Philistines. He cut their dicks off. And that's, pardon my French, but God called David a man after his own heart. And he's cutting dudes' wieners off. Like that's what the Bible says. So like, I'm sorry for being vulgar, but that's what the Bible says. And like, we've got warriors like that. We've been in war for 20 years, mm-hmm. And there's warriors like that, like just salty dudes that have killed more people than they can count. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think that's toxic. Like, I don't know. I was not raised for that to be like that. That's now, I don't think you have to do that to be a manly man. Mm-hmm. Like I know other men who, like I can think of one or two right now that might be a doctor or a lawyer that like they've never been in a fight. Mm-hmm. And they're some of the individuals that in life's hardest lessons, I would want them to be standing next to me, I don't know. I'm a rodeo cowboy, and I think I've not been in a lot of fights myself, but I've been on a lot of bucking horses, a lot of bulls. And I think that in war, there's probably the same kind of people that are in rodeo, this analogy at least. I'm not trying to say that we're equal to those guys at all. Like, obviously the stakes are different. Mm-hmm. But like with rodeo, like there's the kind of guys that like to have ridden a bull. They like to have been on a bull so they can say they've been on a bull. Mm-hmm. Then there's the guys that like to ride bulls. And I think in a fight, there's the same thing. It's like, there's the guys that like to have been in a fight. But then the ones you really got to be scared of are the ones that like to fight. I'm really good buddies with Cerrone. And he likes to fight. He likes to be in it. He likes between the bells. He likes the actual fight. But there's guys that just, they like to have fought. I like to ride bucking horses. I like to be in that moment. Like, it's so pure. Mm-hmm. It's so pure. And it kind of touches on your wild at heart, like a man needs a fight to fight. And like being on the back of a horse, because the thing about bucking horses and rodeo is it's counterintuitive. On a bucking horse, for instance, your intuition will tell you to sit up and pull. But to ride a saddle bronc horse, you have to keep your shoulders behind your hips. So you got to lean back and you've got to lift on your bronc rein, not pull. Because if you get bucked off, you weren't doing one of those two fundamentals. You were either pulling, you weren't lifting, or you weren't staying back. So you got to do them both. So it's counterintuitive. Well, if you let your emotions take over, well, then your intuition takes over. And that's why you see like beginners, they'll sit up and pull, then they get yard darted or ran out the back. And so am I able to control my emotions and be counterintuitive? And in that moment, in that fight, like it's the most pure moment, because the bucking horse is going to do his thing. And when he does, are you able to counteract those emotions and execute? And I think that's what excites me about toxic masculinity, whether it's bronc riding or SEAL Team 6 guy clearing a room or whatever it is. Like, are you able to be counterintuitive in life? Mm-hmm. And for some reason, the kind of guys that are able to do that are getting, I mean, that's what they're after, is the kind of guys that are able to be counterintuitive and go against the flow. Mm-hmm.
I heard maybe it was Jordan Peterson or somebody like that was talking about, it says the meek shall inherit the earth, mm-hmm. but that people take that the wrong way. It's not weak. He describes it as meek as being a warrior, being a soldier, but being able to control that.
Yeah, what was that defensive end's name? White. Was it Reggie White or Randy White? I think it was Reggie White. My dad loved him. He played for the Eagles. He passed away. That's what he said. Don't mistake my meekness for weakness.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I need to look that up. I'm embarrassed for my old man that I don't remember his name.
My perspective really changed having a kid, as far as money, and then also as myself physically and mentally being able to do the hard things. And I'm like, how am I going to protect her? If somebody came up, snatched her up and ran, can I run that person down?
Right.
Or when I catch him, can I kick his ass?
Right.
So that was my thoughts on it. So I was like, I need to get in the gym. I need to learn how to fight. I know you've been doing jiu-jitsu. I haven't got into that yet. It interests me. We did some kickboxing and stuff. And I know on one of your podcasts or something lately, they were saying you need to learn to strike a little bit and roll. But
yeah.
That was my take on it. It was like, I've got to be able to protect my family. And I think that's part of being a man, right?
Well, I was talking to Cerrone, who's been in hundreds of fights, professional fighter for 25 years. And I was like, man, I got in one fight in high school. Me and Chris Brinson rolled around for about 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody came to me on the street, the only thing I would have going in my favor is I'm not in the worst shape, and that I probably won't quit.
Yeah.
Like I will probably, I probably won't. I think that's, like I've been hit kind of hard in rodeo. And that's it. That's it. No training. Mm-hmm. Like if somebody watched UFC, they would have more training than me. And so that's been my motivation as well. It's not that, like, I'm not trying to be a badass. I'm not trying to go fight I have no desire to fight, mm-hmm. but like, I would love for some fundamentals to kick in if I did have to protect myself or my family or my friends, because that's the other thing. If me and you are standing next to each other and somebody pokes you in the chest, if I move away from you, that means me and you ain't friends. But if you and I are friends and like my shoulder gets closer to your shoulder, then that means I'm and so like I know like maybe I have some friends that get poked in the chest, like
Yeah. You can do something.
hopefully.
Yeah. And that's, that was me, like no skills. Like you said, a little bit of just cowboy toughness and grit. I've been kicked by plenty of cattle and horses and stuff like that.
Hopefully that helps you.
Yeah.
But it may not, because in 2024, a lot of people know a lot of things.
Yeah. And when we went to Muay Thai to kickboxing, we warm up and stuff, and he's like, all right, we're going to do some drills. And he's like, we'll do 1, 2, 3 combo. And we're just like, he's like, you don't know what that is, do you? I was like, no. So he had to show us, everything.
Where do you live?
Gatesville.
Yeah. So I live in Winnebago, has like 300 people.
Mm-hmm.
And there happens to be up the road a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And he's
pretty lucky.
So, well, or strategic by the good Lord, like he put him here, and so we have him stop by here in the gym a couple times a week. So that's one of the reasons I chose jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just very intriguing to me. But I'll get to the striking eventually.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they said like jiu-jitsu is very much, I guess, like a chess game. It's if you get submitted, you did something wrong.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about that too. Being a roughie, you probably stayed in the gym, like stayed in shape throughout your life. And now I see your videos, you're doing the cold plunges, doing the sauna, doing jiu-jitsu, the gym, the carnivore diet. Like, talk about like your health regimen a little bit, like what that is.
Well, my old man died of a heart attack at 55. And I've been doing a lot of research. It turns out half the people that die of a heart attack did not have high cholesterol. And that is not what the world has told us.
Mm-hmm. Just like Rogan talks about, they came out with this big lie.
Yeah. Well, it was a theory. It was a theory. And they paint it as truth. It's all a theory. No, there's no proof that red meat causes that.
Mm-hmm.
Or that high cholesterol causes it. Half the people that die from heart attack did not have high cholesterol. Like, how do you explain that? That's 5 out of 10. So you guys are thinking, like, what about those 5? I would have assumed it'd be like 95 out of 100,
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, I kind of got to rethinking, what everyone says about cholesterol. But backing up, like my entire motivation, like I was Jacobs Crawley, who one of my best friends. We were college roommates, like roommates, like we had bunk beds, and he was helping me with my bronc riding. Bull riding, I'm the greatest of all time, but bronc riding, he was helping me out. I needed some help there, and we were talking about it, and it was shortly after he won the world in 2015. But he said 3 words that really kind of resonated with me on my motivation to stay in shape. Because prior to that, it was all rodeo. And I didn't know what would drive a guy to stay in shape when they weren't rodeoing. I'd been rodeoing my whole life. So that was, but he said 3 words, and it was quality of life. And that was the beginning. That was early 16, right after he won the world. Because he was this joker, I wouldn't be surprised if it was less than 2% body fat when he won the world.
Crazy.
And it's not, and it might be 3 or 4 now, like the joke, he's in crazy good shape, but that was an additional driving factor for him, was quality of life. And it blew my mind, and over the last 6 years, I've had 6 surgeries, rodeo related. Like I've had dislocated shoulders 5 times, like my collarbone, broke my collarbone 3 times, 2 back surgeries, just one thing after the other. And so getting back in the arena, like I still do rodeo, but it's just, it's just in and out. And I've realized more than ever just how important, being in good shape is. But one of the things I'm most, one of my driving factors is like just dementia.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it doesn't really run rampant in my family or anything, but just like it terrifies me to just like
lose control.
And I just see so many people just kind of like get towards the last quarter of their life, and they just kind of like, you know, and they're not walking, they're not, but supposedly like actual weight training and sauna and cholesterol are like the best things for your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of my main, you know, the heart deal, nobody really knows. Like that could maybe take me whenever.
Yeah.
I don't think that like fried foods and processed foods are going to help that at all. I feel like that's probably, anyhow, it's also you sharpen your axe every morning before you start chipping away at the tree.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you can't just use that axe all day, every day and not sharpen it. Like you only have 24 hours in the day. And so essentially if you got to, for you and your little girl, you're going to have these, you've got to be hyper focused the times that you're working. And you got to take advantage of every minute, you know, because you're going to want to spend that time with her. And so I suggest early morning when her and Shady are asleep, you're not missing anything.
Yeah.
So like I think you become a morning person, which thankfully I always have been, but dude, nobody's doing anything at 4 a.m. Then you're not going to be getting texts or emails.
Yeah. I love it. I love
from 4 to 6:30. Dude, that's your world. You can read, you can study, you
do
can
whatever you want.
Do whatever you want.
And I've had this conversation recently several times with different people. I heard it somewhere, but there's only so much energy in the world. And this really makes a lot of sense to me. There's only so much energy in the world. So when everybody's awake in the middle of the day, everybody's pulling out of it. There's not that much left for you. But if you can either work really late at night, which, you know, is kind of a jacked up schedule, but it could work for the right person, or early in the morning before people wake up, which is more conducive to our life, you can get some of that energy, you know, draw on some of that energy while everybody else is asleep. And I really believe that. I feel, I've heard people say, you know, I've always thought it was bullshit. You know, you work out, you feel better, you run, you feel better, blah, blah, blah. You wake up early, you feel better. And the best thing I've heard is try to prove it wrong. Go do it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Go do it and try. Don't think that that's right.
Yeah.
You go try to prove it wrong and just see. Because I was one of those people. I was like, you know, I woke up early a lot to go to work, but didn't work out, didn't do anything like that for my health. And then started doing it, started being conscious of it and intentional about it. And you do, like, I love going in the morning, especially if I can get up, like you said, before everybody else, go work out, come back, and I listen to podcasts or something constructive while I'm doing it. So it's mind and body, and then come back and they're waking up and start the day. And it's, you just start ahead of everybody, it seems like.
100%. Yeah.
What about, so I'm kind of on the carnivore diet. I want to know like your take on it. So I mess around a little bit with fasting, and then also mainly carnivore, meat and eggs. I cheat every once in a while. I love chips and queso and chips and hot sauce when we go to the Mexican restaurant.
Well, that's it. That's the rub. The meat and the eggs is the hard part, is the elimination part. It's not the meat and I mean, like, we both love steak. You know, chicken's okay. Eggs are great. You know, you can have milk, cheese. Like, there's all those things are great. I added fruit. I have fruit because, like, once you, like, when you run through your body fat supply, like after however long that takes, like, you will have no energy. And so that fruit helps with the energy. But I've got
a lot more fat on me to burn than you do, so I can see it.
It won't take long. The hardest part, people will start thinking you're on drugs. Like, you'll start losing it in your face, and it will happen immediately. Once you eliminate the chips and salsa, the tacos, like, when you eliminate those things, it takes about 2 months, but it is difficult to get off of bread. That's the new thing for me. Like, I'm not, not to throw rocks at someone who's obese, but, like, in my head, like, if I were to see someone obese, it's just like, oh, they eat a lot of bread. Like, that's my, it's like, just they eat a lot of bread products.
Yeah.
In the form of chips, tortillas, actual bread, cake, whatever it is. And that just like, that's just not providing you any nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Like the grains, the seeds, the flour, it does nothing for you. Dude,
And-
there's people that survive, Jordan Peterson, just beef.
Mm-hmm.
Just beef.
Salt
That's
water
it.
and
Salt,
ruminant meat.
water, beef. That is it. And like thriving. Matter of fact, like their immune diseases their autoimmune disorders, diseases, whatever, are being eliminated because they're going on that diet. Skin conditions gone. So not only are they surviving on it, it's curing things.
Yeah.
That's what got me started. I was like, hold up. Everybody's saying
Cures
beef is bad.
diseases.
This some bitch got on just beef and it cured him.
Mm-hmm.
How is that? I mean, there's something to that. That's what turned the world upside down.
And
like his gums got healthier, everything.
everything.
Only beef, lamb occasionally, like ruminant animals. But like it would be beef. Like that, he would have beef for breakfast, beef for lunch, beef for dinner. And so that's what made me decide to try the carnivore.
And there's so many stories like that. I started following Sean Baker, and I mean, so many stories of people that's changed their lives and cured diseases. You know, me and you didn't have anything that drastic that we had to do it to save our lives.
Correct.
So it's a little bit more difficult, but it was easy for me. Like you said, we like steak, we like eggs. Just start eliminating the
Dude,
the
you don't
other
need
stuff.
sides.
It's easy. It's
This
super
whole
easy
world,
to
like
cook.
it's like yeah, dude.
Just
for
get-
lunch today, I was at Lisa's house, the lady I was talking about earlier. I cooked her a chicken breast and me a steak, and that's it. I had half of the chicken breast and half the steak, and she had the other half, and that was it. You know,
It's super easy.
like and you don't have to have a side. You don't have to have rice and not even salad, which blows my mind. But
And I want to call out the beef industry that we're in it, and why did we have to go on this long journey out into the world to find out
no kidding,
that
why
our
not?
industry could save lives?
Yeah,
like
why
that?
do you go to these producers, like all these beef guys, and they're obese? You know, it's like, what does your buckle say? Well, I can't tell it because it's pointed at the ground because your belly is pushing over. Why don't you guys, well, got to promote the industry. All right, well then just eat beef and see what it does. Like,
Yeah.
let's show the world what beef can do, you know?
Yeah,
That's exactly right. It's a good point.
Some jacked guys up there talking about it. Not,
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you. Like, hey, I'm on beef only.
Yeah.
All right.
yeah, it cures cancer. So now that we've solved a lot of the world's problems, let's get back to business. So, like we talked about, you're a West Texas cowboy, and you kind of fell into doing the video thing, doing the apparel thing. You had to have not known anything about it. How did you learn? Did you seek out mentorship? What was that like?
Yeah. So, my granddad was, my mom's dad was a businessman. And he hustled. He sold furniture in Amarillo. His name was Bob Gorey, and he had some real estate deals. He appreciated the Western industry, but it was more about, he was a businessman, and he taught me a lot of things about, like, for instance, not procrastinating. But really, outside of just watching him do business, like there weren't like a lot of like little like principles. There's some, now don't get me wrong, before he died, the 24 hours before this man died, like in my phone, I had called him 5 times, and he was giving me advice on 5 different business deals that I was trying to do, small ones, whatever. But literally 5 different things. I had talked to him 5 times before he died. I talked to him about an hour before he died. Like, I called this man for advice all the time. And so I had him but it would be like, what do I do right here? And he was just like, all right, well, first thing you do is just pray about it, And he didn't like residential real estate. So like he liked commercial stuff. Like, okay, well, I'm 25 or whatever it was. I'm not going to go buy, commercial piece of property, pawpaw. Like I just don't have that kind of money, And so like there weren't a lot of like just like business sessions he had. It was more just like broad fundamentals. But like he didn't understand the internet at all. So like as a quote unquote influencer, there was nobody in the Western industry. Like Fallon Taylor a little bit at the time. And like she was just kicking off, like her and I would bounce ideas off of each other sometimes, but like we were both each just figuring it out. Like there was nobody creating content. And even my granddad, which later he would kind of change his song and dance, but like he was still kind of like, oh, kids got their phones in their hands. And to be honest, I remember I was like, well, I'll give them something to watch. But there were no real business. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And that's what got me interested in real estate, Robert Kiyosaki. And
that's just that was a very good book for, like, when I read that was eye-opening.
Well, the one thing that did for me was kind of focused me on making sure that if I had money and I was going to do something with that money, was making sure that I was putting it towards something that would make more money.
Right. Buying an asset.
Right. Asset, exactly. And that's what that book defines. An asset versus a liability. A liability, for instance, a vehicle. A vehicle loses money the moment you get it. An asset makes money the moment you get it. My interns last night were on our way home from a rodeo, and they're making fun of me because I'm going to have to go to their house to watch the playoff games. Because frickin' Hulu costs $70 a month. And so I'm going to my intern's house to watch the games because I am too tight to buy, and they literally said it's hilarious the lines that you will draw.
Yeah.
But essentially an asset versus a liability. And so I read that book early on. I've got another friend named Jeremy Melanson, and he's out of Huntsville, Turnkey Metal Buildings. He builds custom homes. And look him up. He's brilliant. He helps people. He helps contractors who are trying to build homes. He'll like the scope of what he does helping people. If you are a builder or you are wanting to build a house, you have to talk to Jeremy Melanson first. Like he's just the most brilliant individual that I know. Very logical. He's also one of those 3 humble people that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So anyway, I talked to him a lot, and then Gary Vee. 2017, about 7 years ago, I found Gary Vee. I consumed him like he was my new dad.
Yeah.
And he taught me a lot about content, but also business. And so like you were talking about working out, well, like the podcasts I was listening to were Gary Vee. So those were the only places where I had teaching. Like I just had to get creative. But when it came to making decisions as an influencer, a YouTuber, especially after my granddad died, like I was sad he died, but also like I didn't tip a waitress without calling that man and asking his advice. And so he died in 19, and that was, kind of when I was just getting started with business.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know what I'm doing, especially when you talk about like just where is it okay to have debt? Where is it not? Like, because there's Kiyosaki and then there's Dave Ramsey, and so like where does which one apply? And I'm in both camps. I've got a foot in both camps without getting into the weeds of my P&L statement. Like, it just depends on which day you catch me, which camp I'm in. But there's places where I allow risk and there's other places that I don't. And so I've had to learn, but again, all of it has essentially been driven by fear of going back to, this is America. You know what I'm saying? Like there's people that had it way worse. Even in America, there were people that had it way worse, but like, who's to say I would just even go back to that? What if I went further, I don't know, like, and maybe that's bad that like, but I just don't have this freaking island with jet skis. Like, that's not my goal, you know? Like, if I were to have a few more acres one day with a few more cows, like, that would be cool. But really, like,
the freedom.
I took all my interns on a field trip to R.A. Brown Ranch, and Donald Brown was like, hey, man, he went around the horn and asked each one, where do you want to be in 5 years? He asked all of them. And for some reason, when it got to me, I wasn't ready for him. I was like, oh, I guess you would ask me. Of course, I'm in the circle too. But it was so easy for me to answer. If I'm doing exactly what I'm doing today in 5 years, then I'm happy. Like, I'm my life is so completely amazing. Like, I get to make content. I get to,
you're living your dream life.
Yeah. My warehouse is 0.7 miles away from my house. Like, I get to be around rodeo even when I'm hurt and I'm not in it. I'm still putting interns on bucking horses. And so that's my motivation.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what I'm trying to do. You know, you want to live your dream life and figure out how to do that. So mine, I've been living it for years, is day working, ranching, having a little bit of my own operation and getting to rope and having the freedom. But I also come to the realization after having a family that I also need to provide, and doing it scraping for money all the time was not necessarily the right way. So I'm going about it. I'm going back, and I'm going to. Well, that's trying to figure out how to live that life.
That's another thing we could talk about, because people come here. I mean, I've got an intern program. Like, that's a lot of my content revolves around the interns and the Netflix show, and people reach out to me like, Dale, how do I get started ranching? How do I get started rodeoing? One of those two things. That's where How to Be a Cowboy, the Netflix show, that's where it came from. I got that DM, still get it 20 times a day. How do I get started ranching?
There was a need, and
that's where the show went. We poured water on the table, and that's where it went. So anyways, I get asked that still, and they'll come here and they're like, 22, no money, no inheritance coming, no land attached to them. They're like, all right, I want to, like, all right, well, what's your goal and what's your vision, and I want to have a ranch one day. I want to have cows, and I want that to, and I had one particular intern. He was like, I want to have a ranch one day with cows and a house, nice house. And I'd also like to be a rodeo cowboy and be a world champ. And I want to do I want to have real estate too. And, he's just going on. He wants all the things.
That guy's got a lot of work ahead of him.
He's 23, 24. And I am not going to tell you you're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to tell you can't do that. But what small success I've had, and what I realize it takes to the work it takes, behind that, it's just like, okay, that is fine. Like 100%, you can be more successful than me and the next guy and do all the things you want to do. But you're going to have to be the most creative son of a there is if you want to accomplish that by ranching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you start with I'm not saying it can't be done. Even in 2024, there's some creativeness that you can have in this industry, and maybe like you're doing all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if you want to learn how to be a top hand on your way to owning the ranch, you know what I'm saying? When you come in at 22, 30 years old, I get messages from people 40, and what it takes to buy land. Like, you can't make the land payment with the cow.
Mm-hmm.
So how is this going to work? I'm not trying to be depressing here. I'm trying to be realistic.
It's just the
land is freaking expensive.
Yeah.
The cows are expensive, and most people that have cows, it's a write-off.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't make very much money with them. And we were joking because, like, I've been running cows for years, and I've got a little nest egg from my cows, and I'm about to make a purchase to wipe it out. It's a trailer. I'm going to get a trailer, and I'm back to zero.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, I had a guy working for me, and he was just like, all I want to really do is the cows. I was like, well, unfortunately, I can't afford to pay you then, because I'm not sure if you realize this warehouse, but that's not what is paying your salary right now is my cows. They barely pay for themselves. I'm just trying to be realistic.
Yeah.
Now, Buster Frierson, I did a podcast with him as well. You did too. Like, he is a picture perfect individual of how you can make it work. But it's very focused, and he works his ass off, and there's not a lot of extra time for stuff. So, like, it can be done, and there are ways, but, like, it's kind of like, I'm sure, the way every person that shows up to the Navy says they want to be a SEAL.
Yeah.
And then it's 1% of 1% that actually do it. All right. Well, that's your Buster Friersons. If you're going to accomplish all that simply by cowboying, you got a long road to hoe. You know, and that's okay. But, or you get super creative, you know, start a YouTube channel, for instance, start a podcast, start a dirt work service, start, you know, invent something. There's ways that it can be done, but where you use creativity. But if you want to, I just told him, I was like, dude, if you want to own the ranch, you're probably not going to do it by being the top hand on the ranch. If you're starting at 25 and you don't know anything about cowboying, now if you've lived 25 years and you're already there, well, that's a little different. Then there's some other, but like if you start at 25, like somebody could clip this and call me like a negative Nancy, but like look at the whole big picture, you know, and look at these people that own the ranches. They've got a little bit different. Sometimes they're not the top hand on the ranch. And that's not a coincidence.
And most of them probably made their money somewhere else.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. You know, and, or if they didn't, they were born into that ranch.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't mean nobody else can accomplish it. This is America. But you've got to get really creative, and you got to be really patient, and you got to work your ass off. You know? I joke. I was trying to make a video how to get started ranching. Well, I lost a cow. I had 2 blowouts on a tire. Something got out, and I looked at the camera. How to get started ranching? Don't, you know? And we scrapped the whole thing because I was had a bad attitude that day because everything was going wrong. We made another one later, but like, you know, if like sometimes there's days that's how you feel, but essentially, just you need to be mindful. If people are doing this as a write-off, you know, then like, all right, well, hold on. They're making their money somewhere else. They don't want to give the taxes to the government, so they're spending it on this because it's fun. You know, is that the way I need to make the money to do that?
Yeah.
Now, there's other things you can do. Number one, you don't have to own the ranch. You know, you can, you know, be a farrier, work at the sale barn, be a day worker, run somebody's cows, sell some horses, trade some horses, you know, learn to train them, and then trade, you know, all those things I just listed, Buster Frierson can do. And so he's making money year round. He's day working in the spring, dragging calves. He's weaning in the fall. In the summer, he's picking up bulls. Then he's trading horses in and out. You know, he's grown his brand, and he's used the internet. He's leveraged that. And so there's all these ways that you can make it work, but it is going to be some hard work.
Yeah, and I remember when I was graduating college, my grandpa.
And let me just finish this thought. It's going to be some hard work, and you need to keep in mind that if you put that same amount of effort into other things, you will make way more money. And you will not, or half that effort into any other industry, you make way more money. But going back to my dad and that point we were making, we usually don't look at success through the lens of money. You know, we want to be happy in this life. We're not in it for the money. Anyhow, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Your grandpa.
Yeah, I was graduating college, and my grandpa asked me, he said, you know, what are you going to do now? He owned a machine shop and then had a place, had a few cows, and I was like, you know, I'm gonna buy some cows. I'm gonna ranch.
Yeah.
He said, well, you know, how many cows you think it's gonna take for you to make a living? And I said, you know, 100 cows. You know, I figured I make $500 a calf, 50,000. I'll, you know, be doing pretty good. He was like, well, you know, I've got these cows out here, and he said, they're just a write-off. They don't make any money. I spend a lot of money on them. And I was like, you know, he was a hobby farmer or whatever, you know. So I was like, you know, there's ways that you could improve the operation. And monetize it a little bit better, but I had to go through that myself, and I leased a place and turned some cows out, and all the struggles of fixing the fence in the front and in the front end, before I turned them out, hauling stuff around, them getting out all the time, going and fixing water gaps, the feed, all those costs that incur. And then I'm not drawing anything out on the front side, which you can on the back side. And there's different ways of doing it. Like you said, you can get creative, but it's not what I thought. I was like, at one point in my life, I thought 100 cows and I would be rich and I would have it made, and that is not the case at all. So as you go through life, you kind of...
Cows don't equal wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can make money on cows, but like the number of cows you have doesn't necessarily equal wealth. There's so much to it. And I thought the same thing. And it's funny you use the number 100 because at the most, Leroy and I had like 110, 120 cows. And leading up to that, I was like, dude, we're on our way. The other thing that happened was, I think it was 2014 or 15, the first time it spiked the market where you were.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really good.
We had bought some bred cows for $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
We sold their calves for $1,500, and I knew we weren't going to do that every year. But essentially, I was like, well, dang, if we can do close, and so that was the beginning of us having cows.
Mm-hmm.
And
then it tanks right after that and quits raining. And
there were some ups and downs after that. But essentially, cows don't equal wealth. And I took the long way around, and I lost a lease and we had to sell 60 of them. And I put that money directly into real estate, Now I'm not saying I hate cows. I've got some lease places. At the time, I didn't have any more country, and so
you had to.
It's like I need to do something with this where it makes money, and these cows are costing me more money than they're making me, because the time in my life, I just didn't have anywhere to put them, and I was forcing it, and you can't push a rope, and so I put that money towards real estate, and you know what, after 9 years. It's worth more.
Yeah.
Not about to die. You got to replace it. And again, I'm not telling everybody they need to go into real estate and forget cows, but I'm just trying to take a different approach and maybe come back to more cows later on in life.
Yeah, and I've come to that, and I would suggest the same thing to people listening that want to get started. Is just run the numbers. If you only have a small place and you're going to go put up $10,000 to buy 10 head of cows, say, to turn out on a little place, you're not going to make much off of it. And like you said, they're getting less valuable as they get older. You're going to have to start culling them, and it's a whole process. But if you were to take the 10,000, if you only had 10,000 and you took that and, like you said, put it in real estate or put it in a business like you've done. Start a business is probably the best thing if you can, or real estate or whatever that is. Invest it somewhere where you're going to get a big return and put it in an appreciating asset, and then take that money and go back and buy cows. And I think you're in a lot better spot. The more you move that money, like I do life insurance a little bit. And I've learned if you could take the money, put it in life insurance, pull it back out, put it in real estate, and then pull it back out and put it in cows. And you've moved that money every time and increase the value of it every time. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there, some of which I'm just guessing.
So you got started running this business. What are some struggles you could put out to? I hope that there's some business owners, watching and listening. What are some struggles as far as leading people, managing people, supply chain? Is there any advice you could give?
The biggest struggle that I did not know would be a struggle is managing people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say struggle, challenge. The biggest challenge. I appreciate it. I enjoy it. But yeah, supply chain stuff is just you just deal with it. Mm-hmm. It happens when it happens. Get it when you can. Cash flow is really another challenge for a lot of. Typically it's not sales; it's the cash flow and making sure that you're allocating all those funds in the right places, and that stuff I don't know a lot about. But managing people is the main thing. Like that's creating a culture. Culture is the most important thing. Like I've let go of people that were high producers that were making us money, but they weren't good for culture. Mm-hmm. And so that is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And there's times I'm sure some of those people would argue that I'm not good for culture, but I'm doing my best. So the tough thing is communication. Mm-hmm. For some reason I think it might be just maybe I am intimidating. Being someone who's easily intimidated, I wouldn't think of myself as intimidating, or maybe it's just because I'm the boss, but like, it seems like it's like, man, why didn't they come tell me that?
Yeah.
Why did they let it fester and then 6 months later quit?
Right.
Well, and then a good friend of mine, Dusty Burson, one of my two best friends, Jeremy, the other guy I mentioned being the other one, Jeremy and Dusty are my best friends, but Dusty was like, I think maybe it's just because you are the boss. And when you go to your boss, you either have a problem or you need something, typically. And human nature is to not to want to take that to someone.
Yeah.
And so like people hold in their problems and they can become a bigger one.
Yeah.
It starts small and then resentment grows and eventually it blows up. And so if you're not addressing and even asking and trying to pull those problems out and deal with them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, then you're going to have an even bigger problem down the road. And that's one thing I've learned. And I try to beg these guys, like, listen, if there's something I'm unaware of or a problem you have with a coworker or me, like, let's talk about it, please. Like, I'm not saying I'll have the answer, but it'll be better than you holding it in.
Have you used like some cowboy wisdom, something that you've got from Cowboy? And I mean, just because you're a guy leading a drive, you're still leading men. So, I mean, have you got anything from that you implement into the business?
Well, I've heard, somebody say once, nice guys don't get the cows gathered, but also, like, if that's your main mentality, like, eventually what is the culture like on a crew like that? Mm-hmm. And now I'm not saying that means it's a popularity contest. You get a bunch of, comedians out there that just joke around and have fun. Like, I mean, work ethic is obviously, I would argue, the most important thing, period, no matter what. But I think culture is,
whether you're on a ranch or in a business.
Whether you're on a ranch or, like, culture is so important. And if you've been around some of these big ranches, like, there's times and there's places where, and if you spend time on big ranches, it's just the exact same as a corporation or a high school or a football team. It doesn't matter. Like, if there's a cancer within that organization, it can spread and people can get, start gossiping about each other and get mad at each other. It can lead to actual physical altercations. Like, a ranch is no different than anywhere. And, like, culture is the most important thing. So if I were to step over and be a wagon boss or a manager of a ranch somewhere, like, that culture would be important to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's, a lot of the good bosses value that, and how they talk to their employees, how they let their employees talk to them, how their employees talk to each other, how they deal with the wives of the employees, because they all live on the same property, and so, yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap there. And I feel like a really good wagon boss would probably be a really good anything boss.
I kind of want to stick on that, but get to some wrap-up questions. So on the Glenn Beck podcast that you were on, he talked about he keeps his top 5 mentors, keeps their pictures around. What would be your top 5 mentors through life?
I mean, I've got kind of a circle of a counsel, if you will, that I seek, and most all of them I've mentioned here on this podcast. I talk to Dusty twice a day. I talk to Jeremy every other day, and those guys I bounce ideas off of, and we help each other with personnel issues and money issues. There's a third person I talk to often, and that's Corey Anderson. He runs the marketing for Total Feeds, one of my sponsors, and just a super interesting individual. And he's got a degree in, I think it's psychiatry. He's not a psychiatrist, like he didn't do all the testing for it, but that was like what his degree was working towards. And so he's just got a good natural tendency to help people. And what he says is essentially what they do, like a therapist is going to help you realize what you actually think or want.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, when I call Corey, most of what he actually says is, so what are you thinking? Or, so what are you going to do? And he'll just ask that again and again and sometimes I'm just like, no, I want you to tell me what to think. But so yeah, Jeremy Melanson, Dusty Burson, Corey Anderson, it was my dad and my granddad.
Yeah.
And so at this point, there's just a whole lot of, what would they do?
Yeah.
In this instance, and hopefully I had listened enough to where they've instilled those fundamentals in me when it comes to, my dad being like the hard life decisions, like when I'm met with a lot of what's in the world today, like how do I respond to that? And, there's a lot of others that like I'll call on for advice on certain things, like I talk to Cowboy Cerrone a lot, like I've asked Trevor's advice on some things, and like it's good to get to visit with like some of the goats, and my brand has allowed me to have some of those relationships, and they've turned into friendships, and which, those kind of guys don't mind, you don't, and those guys will help anybody, but, I don't have, like if ideally what I would have is another version of me. Like I would have somebody that's better than me to like come alongside me in this organization, because under this roof, there's actually 2 companies, 3 or 4, but essentially for sake of conversation, there's 2. It's Rodeo Time Incorporated, which is the apparel, and then Rodeo Time Media. And the apparel is the business that, drives everything financially, but the media is what drives the finances of, they work
the
side
marketing
by
side. Yeah.
And I enjoy most the media side of things. The salesman in me loves doing the sales of Rodeo Time Inc., but I just don't know enough over there. I don't know what CAC and LTV are. I don't know like a lot of that terminology, and like I don't know what my customer acquisition costs are. And so yeah, I'm that'll be my main thing, is just my ignorance, and hopefully one day I can get somebody to come in alongside me and help me. But
I'm sure you will, especially with your connections and the reach.
The problem is
I
live out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But
so you're traveling a lot, rodeoing. You have your whole life, and you still are, and got appearances and all that type of stuff. What are you listening to in the truck? Is it podcasts, music, audibles?
All the above. Yeah, I've got, I listen to Joe Rogan, and some of those guys, Cam Haynes. I listen to a lot of music, Texas country, but then also some audiobooks. Like I really like not only those books on humility, like some of the deep tracks there, like C.S. Lewis books, but also military books, like stuff like I've probably listened in the last 2 years. I've probably actually cracked a book open and read or listened to an audio book of like 15 or 16 different books on the war that's gone on, whether it's Navy SEALs or Delta or whatever it is. Like I'm just intrigued with, as a rodeo cowboy, we're a pretty patriotic bunch. So,
what would your dream vacation be? And I asked Chick this, and he tied it back to rodeo. So you may want to do the same. But whatever that is, if it's laying on a beach, if it's going to some certain rodeos, if it's going on a cruise.
I mean, I love rodeos. Like I was at one last night, like going into, freshly plowed arena, like that smell, there's something to it that is just paradise to me. It takes me back to like my roots. Like I think about my old man and that fight on a bronc. Like, yeah, that's life. But like, I don't know, since I was a kid, there's with some of the struggles at home, like when we were on the road, like in a hotel, that was just a blissful escape from everything. And for some reason, like being in a hotel really allows me to just, so like I love going into a hotel room. And also, like I said, I don't have access to live sports because I'm cheap. And so like I get to watch basketball and football games. And so like,
so just going to a big town, going to the hotel is kind of like a
it
treat.
Doesn't bother me. Yeah, it's not bad. But I do love a beach. Like I've been blessed over the last several years to get to go to some, and I'm 100 miles an hour. I'm up at 4:30 here. I'm working out. I'm doing all those things. I've got a laundry list, but like being on a beach for 4 days and just sleep in and go and sit and just listen to waves is. Now there's a time limit. Once you get to 7 days, that's too long.
Yeah.
About 4 days is plenty.
Yeah. I feel that way about being on the beach or going to the snow. About 7 days is pushing it. Maybe 3, 4, 5, something like that.
To be honest, that's my retirement. Like that's my goal. Is one day I go to a beach once or twice a summer and go skiing once or twice a winter, but then work the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm. That was my next question. What would retirement look like?
It would
for
look
you?
like that. Like I still work, cows, hopefully this, something like
basically living it,
real estate,
what you're doing
whatever
right
it is.
now. But
if I were doing exactly what I'm doing right now for the next 20, 30, 40 years, like that's fine with me. But I might take 2 weeks in the summer, a week here, a week at the end of the summer, 2 weeks in the winter.
Yeah.
And like that, I don't know. As of right now, that's that would be retirement for me.
So you've mentioned real estate a few times, and I was going to ask that question also about if there was anything else besides apparel that you are looking to get into in the future, or that you already are in, if you're investing the money that you're making somewhere.
I'm constantly looking for it. Constantly. I got I'm looking for another product. Like I love apparel and I love that game, but like I feel like I'd like something consumable. Being on carnivore, I have this seasoning that my buddy makes that 3 times a day I use this seasoning. I put it on that steak at lunch I was talking about. And it's the best tasting seasoning I've ever tasted. Like it's a 10. The next best seasoning I can think of would be like a 6.5.
Yeah.
I put it on everything. So me and him were going to partner. It's his family recipe. He was super passionate about it, and he was super hungry to do things. But the way it was looking like I was going to do all these things, and like it was going to work out, and he was excited. But I was like, dude, you need to do this. You need to do this for you and go down this entrepreneurial space. He was a day work cowboy.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll help you along the way, and then I'll promote it for free. You just get it off the ground. And he and I were so close that like I didn't step out of it because I thought it wasn't going to be successful. I stepped out of it because I thought it was going to be successful, and it needs to be his.
Yeah.
I'll help him get there. So I thought it was going to be that for a little bit, but I think he's going to, and eventually whoever listens to this, you guys will see, I'll start promoting it because it's bad to the bone. And I want my buddy to win, and he will win. And technically I will have missed out, but like my buddy won.
Yeah.
So like I didn't, it's great.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, but I maybe something like that in the future. So I've got some
other products.
I got a new sponsor coming on that's pretty interesting, and there may be some sort of relationship there that's big for both of us. But
what about your real estate?
The real estate I love, like that would be hopefully what
just buy and hold single family homes. Is that kind of what you're doing now?
I like the idea of multifamily also, but like for a town like Graham, like, dude, the single family stuff is just like, it's a badass town. It's a badass area. Everybody wants to live there. And like,
is that the main market you're in?
There's a couple others, but like Graham is like to me, it's like, it's Texas. It's a nice town. It's a clean town. And then being able to provide affordable housing for somebody, you know, they get a win. And then we're probably too low in rent on a lot of things, but Lisa runs it. And like, she's like, she's been there, you know, she's been a renter.
Yeah.
So like, she's in charge of it. I let her set it, but like, she's going to make it fair for everybody.
Yeah. Win.
Yeah.
But what about if there's one piece of content of yours that could live forever, a Facebook post, a YouTube video, a podcast, and it could be something that you've already done or something that you have on your mind that you want to get out there eventually, what do you think that would be? What piece of content?
The Dale
would it be?
Brisby sermon. Not because like I want people to hear me talk about that, but because I think that I've realized I don't think we as Christians understand like how important humility is as a Christian. Like Andrew Murray said, you can have no more faith than you have humility, meaning like pride will be what keeps people out of heaven. And because so long as you're looking down on everybody, you can't look up. Like it's so important. Humility is so important that like Andrew Murray was saying, accept with gratitude anything that reminds you of or brings you to humility. So like a lot of people like say like, oh yeah, you need to be successful, you got to be excited about losing. You got to fall in love with losing. Well, they say that so that you can learn how to win. But Andrew Murray is saying like, no, you need to fall in love with losing because it's going to make you humble, because that's how you grow closer to Christ. That's how important it is. Not so you can then win. Well, you can win, but like win in the fact of like going to heaven. Anyways, the long story short, he who humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And I think that's way more important. And I think that as cowboys, rodeo cowboys, in any industry, all of the above, as humans, Americans, like there's just so much pride. We all have so much pride, myself included. And, but anyhow, on a lighter note, second to that, we've got a movie script, and it'd be cool to one day do a movie.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So I got a guy that works for me, Cole Snyder. He's a brilliant writer. He could go on to be a Taylor Sheridan one day. And he and another buddy, Logan West, helped me finish a movie script. I started it, and Logan and Cole helped me finish it, but we wrote a movie, and that would be cool to do. So,
yeah.
But anyway, cool question.
Well, y'all stay tuned. We're going to wrap it up on that. What can the listeners do to help you out? Go follow you, buy some Rodeo Time.
Man, if they've listened this long, I mean, that means they're not so irritated by my voice I just appreciate anybody that watches anything. Yeah, if they want to get apparel at rodeo-time.com, that's great. But I mean, just watching the videos is great with me. Hopefully I provide value and they keep watching.
Cool. Well, if y'all are listening to this on the Apple or Spotify or Google, whatever, and you want to watch it, see this cool studio at Dale's, check it out on YouTube, The Wealthy Cowboy Show. Follow me, The Real Crockett Carruthers, hashtag The Wealthy Cowboy, hashtag The Wealthy Cowboy Show. And if you would, since we're getting started, please share it out. I don't want to ask y'all to do too much, so do one of three things. You can rate, review, or share. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, share it out anyway. Somebody else may like it. And with that, that's a wrap. We'll see y'all next time.
Pow, pow.